Identifying something as too good to be true generally means it is. It's uncommon for there to be a perfect scenario that always makes you money with zero risk. It's the nature of every get-rich-quick scheme out there. Opportunities to make money by doing little physical work exist, but they usually come with a higher degree of risk. That's what separates a legitimate financial investment from a Ponzi scheme. The fact that the investment is described as no risk is the first red flag that anyone looking to invest their money should notice. Charles Ponzi was not the first person to have swindled investors by simply paying off existing clients with the money brought in from new clients. In the book The Notorious Mrs. Clem, Murder and Money in the Gilded Age by Wendy Gamber, the author claims that Nancy Clem carried out the first Ponzi scheme in 1868. Another example is recorded in Munich, Germany in 1869, and it happened a few more times throughout the rest of the 19th century. But it was Charles Ponzi in 1920 who carried out the fraud on such a large and noticeable scale that his name would go down in history as being synonymous with financial fraud. Carlo Pietro Giovanni Guglielmo Tebaldo Ponzi was born on March 3, 1882 in Lugo, Italy. Most of the information about his early life comes directly from him, so its accuracy should be taken with a grain of salt. Fraudsters and conmen have a tendency to embellish or even flat-out lie about their pasts to make their victims trust them more. According to him, he came from a wealthy family who had fallen on hard times prior to his birth. When he was old enough, he worked odd jobs, but was eventually accepted to the Sapienza University of Rome. He spent more time hanging out with friends and drinking than studying, and after a few years he was broke and had to leave. He had heard stories of other Italians traveling to the United States where opportunities for success and wealth were plentiful, so he decided to follow suit and head west across the Atlantic. The ambitious Italian immigrant who went by Charles in the U.S. arrived in Boston aboard the SS Vancouver on November 15, 1903. He carried just $2.50 in his pocket. His words to a New York Times reporter later captured his spirit perfectly, with him saying, quote, "I landed in this country with $2.50 in cash and $1 million in hopes, and those hopes never left me." Life as an immigrant in America hit Charles hard with reality. The promised land of opportunity looked nowhere near what most immigrants had pictured. All the same, his natural charm and knowledge of Italian, English, and French helped him direct his way through those original challenges. A closer look at his work history shows he didn't seem to be able to hold down a job, and sometimes crossed ethical lines. His early years in America saw him bounce between positions along the East Coast: dishwasher, grocery clerk, factory hand, sign painter, insurance salesman, librarian, and he worked as a waiter until he was fired for theft and shortchanging customers. He jumped from job to job while his mind stayed fixed on quick money-making schemes. His notebook filled up with potential business ideas. His strong dislike for manual labor, exactly what he'd hoped to leave behind in Italy, pushed him to look for easy ways to get rich. Charles moved to Montreal, Canada in 1907 after failing to establish himself in the United States. He landed a job at Banco Zerossi, a bank created specifically for the growing Italian immigrant community. His language skills and charm helped him climb quickly from assistant teller to bank manager. His time at Banco Zerossi showed him the banking practice that would later shape his notorious scheme. The bank charged Italian immigrants high interest rates while promising returns that seemed too good to be true. The bank's bad real estate investments led the bank to start paying old depositors with new deposits instead of actual profits, basically robbing Peter to pay Paul. The collapse of Banco Zarasi left Charles broke and in legal trouble, and he ended up in a Quebec prison for 3 years on check forgery charges. He kept that from his mother in Italy, telling her instead that he worked at the prison. Once released, he moved back into the United States but was caught smuggling Italian immigrants across the border. He served another 2 years in federal prison in Atlanta before being released back into the world. Charles returned to Boston in December of 1919. By then he was married and was ready to start the venture that would make him both rich and notorious. Though the scheme is named after him, Charles Ponzi was not the first to carry out this type of scam. Obviously, he learned about it from the bank he worked at in Montreal at the beginning of the 20th century, but other people had been committing Ponzi schemes before Charles Ponzi was even born. Of course, there was already the mention of Nancy Clem having committed the swindle in 1868, but the evidence of that isn't rock solid. The next record of a Ponzi scheme was Adele Spitzeder in 1869. She founded Spitzeder's Privatbank in Munich, Germany, where she promised customers a 10% interest rate per month, paying existing companies with the funds from new customers. She was arrested in 1872, and her 32,000 customers lost a total of 38 million gulden, which would be over 400 million euros today. Early on, it seems as though the Ponzi method of financial fraud was popular with women, because the next example was also carried out by the fairer sex. Sarah Howe opened a bank for women in Boston in 1879 called the Ladies' Deposit Company. She initially offered a 2% interest rate per week, which changed to 8% per month, and in less than a year, her bank was revealed to be a fraud and she was arrested. Her customers lost a total of $500,000, more than $16 million today. In 1880, former U.S. President Ulysses S. Grant and his son Buck formed a brokerage firm with a man named Ferdinand Ward, who was in charge of the financial operations. After losing all of their initial capital and bad investments, he turned the firm into a Ponzi scheme in order to maintain the image of success. When the swindle was discovered in 1884, millions of dollars had been stolen, and it bankrupted the Grant family along with the Marine National Bank and heightened the worry of people during the ongoing Depression era from 1882 to 1885. The Universal Postal Union, or UPU, created the International Reply Coupon, or IRC, system on May 26, 1906. IRCs made global mail correspondence easier. People in one country could pay ahead for someone's reply from another country. Basically, a sender bought an IRC in their home country at local postage rates and included it with the mail they were sending to someone in another country. The recipient got stamps for return postage by exchanging the coupon at their local post office. That alone wouldn't have been of any benefit to Charles, but then post-war European economies crashed and their currencies lost value across the continent. The official rates for postal coupons stayed the same even though currency values changed drastically. The UPU set those postage exchange rates to match currency exchange rates between countries. The quick post-war inflation created a big gap between real currency values and the old IRC exchange rates. It was in the summer of 1919 that Charles got a letter from someone in Spain with an IRC coupon inside. Somehow, Charles learned of the discrepancy in values and realized he could exploit it for profit. Charles realized that the coupon could be purchased in Spain for the equivalent of about 1 American cent, but it was worth 6 cents in the United States. The idea of multiplying his money 6 times caught his attention right away. He saw a legal way to profit, buy something cheap in one place and sell it for more somewhere else. It was a simple and effective business strategy that had worked for generations. He would use American dollars to buy lots of IRCs in countries with weak currencies like Italy and Spain. He would ship them to the United States, change them for American stamps, and sell those stamps for cash. His calculations showed he could make over 400% profit after covering all costs. So Charles intended to make money with a legal venture, but he vastly underestimated what it would take to actually make any real money in the process. In order to create profits for his initial 18 investors, he would have to bring 53,000 postal coupons to the United States from Europe. Then he would have to change them to US postage and then find a way to turn them into cash, something he was never able to do even on a small scale. In order to make profits for the more than 20,000 investors he eventually had, he would need to be constantly bringing shiploads of coupons across the Atlantic. He would need to be exchanging millions of coupons constantly, and the infrastructure and staff it would have necessitated would have been massive. Despite that, he used the money-making model to attract 18 investors who each invested $100 apiece. Charles launched his business, the Securities Exchange Company in Boston, in January of 1920. His investment pitch was irresistible. A 50% profit in 45 days, or an amazing 100% profit within 90 days. That was a big deal, as regular bank returns sat at 5% annually for savings accounts. Understandably, business grew quickly, and Charles moved his office to the Niles Building on School Street in Boston. In February and March of 1920, his investments jumped from $5,000 to $25,000. In May, they were at $420,000, and in June they had reached $2.5 million. By July of 1920, Charles was bringing in nearly $1 million daily. He started by focusing on the local immigrant community, but the scheme's reputation climbed social ladders and ended up catching the attention of Boston's wealthy social elite. His investment opportunity became so popular that all but one of Boston's police officers invested their money in his promises. Money poured in so fast that 6 clerks worked non-stop to process it. Charles managed to keep his successful image by buying control over Hanover Trust Bank after a $3 million deposit. Of course, the money was coming in, but he wasn't actually investing in anything. He had abandoned his plan to buy and sell postal coupons almost immediately. Like with Banco Zarasi in Montreal, Charles just used new investor money to pay earlier investors. Investors who wanted their money got paid right away through Hanover Trust Bank checks. Most of the investors' attention was drawn to their returns, though, so they put their earnings back in, which helped keep the fraud going. The classic rob Peter to pay Paul system worked as long as new money exceeded withdrawals. Charles's fraud scheme worked through several convincing elements that made it look legitimate. His deceptive operation used such persuasive tactics that skeptics found themselves drawn into the scheme. His credibility came from his use of genuine financial instruments. International reply coupons were legitimate postal vouchers that the UPU regulated. His claim of purchasing those coupons abroad at a discount and selling them at face value in the United States for huge profits is a legitimate financial strategy called arbitrage. It's defined as the simultaneous buying and selling of securities, currencies, or commodities in different markets or in derivative forms in order to take advantage of differing prices for the same asset. The scheme made logical sense to many people. Currency fluctuations after World War I created genuine price differences between countries. Those real-life economic conditions made his claim seem plausible. The concept of how Charles Ponzi was going to make money appeared sophisticated yet simple enough to understand, a combination that commonly attracts investors. On top of that, he ran a formal company, he had an office with staff, he provided proper documentation, and his finances went through a legitimate bank. When you combine that with Charles's perfect track record of payouts early on, it's not hard to see why more and more people flocked to take advantage of his services. Investors who were thrilled with their returns shared their success stories eagerly. That positive message became Charles's best marketing tool. The original investors became unwitting accomplices as they recruited friends, relatives, and professional associates. But Charles also added to the allure of investing with him by making it seem like he was very selective about investors, which made people beg to participate. That air of exclusivity made the scheme more appealing and created a sense of privilege amongst those allowed to invest. The scheme took advantage of what economists later called irrational exuberance. People saw others making big profits and assumed the investments were safe. That psychological effect often overshadowed any logical analysis of the situation. All of those elements combined to create a perfect storm of perceived legitimacy that hid Charles's operation's fundamental flaws. But it wouldn't be long before some people started to take notice. Charles's operation became more noticeable by the summer of 1920. Watchful journalists started to ask critical questions about the extraordinary returns he was offering. His unlikely financial empire faced heavy scrutiny from media outlets and government authorities by July. The Boston Post led the investigative effort under editor Richard Grosier's direction. He assigned financial reporter Clarence Barron to look into Charles Ponzi's claims. It was that journalist who brought several damning facts to light. Charles would need to purchase 160 million postal reply coupons to cover his outstanding investments, but there were only about 27,000 postal reply coupons in circulation throughout the entire world. And of course, moving and redeeming such huge volumes was physically impossible. The Boston Post ran a front-page expose on July 26, 1920 with the headline, "Ponzi may be using money from new investors to pay old ones." That piece not only directly challenged Charles's credibility, it exposed his hidden criminal history in Canada. Now, that article hit the public with a serious reality check, but Massachusetts Bank Commissioner Joseph Allen had started auditing the operation even before the Post's revelations. The commissioner found that there was at least $3 million in debt on July 24, 1920. A federal investigation ended up revealing that Charles had bought only $30 worth of international reply coupons. Ever. Public confidence fell apart almost overnight. Thousands of worried investors crowded Charles's office on School Street. The fraudster managed to keep his composure despite the mounting evidence and claimed complete solvency. He cleverly kept paying investors who asked for withdrawals using funds from newer deposits to try restoring public trust. All the same, his scheme's foundations had crumbled beyond repair. Federal authorities acted quickly to gather mounting evidence. U.S. Attorney Daniel Gallagher filed mail fraud charges against Charles on August 12, 1920. Auditors revealed the shocking scale of his fraud after his arrest. He held approximately $1.5 million in assets. He held more than $7 million in debt. His investors lost roughly $20 million in total, more than $300 million today. Charles Ponzi pleaded guilty to one federal count of using mail to defraud when faced with overwhelming evidence. The judge gave him a 5-year federal prison sentence. Bankruptcy proceedings went on long after Charles went to prison. His victims got back less than 30 cents per dollar from bankruptcy trustees. Most small investors lost everything they had invested. Charles had served about 3.5 years of his federal sentence when he learned he had 22 state charges of larceny waiting in Massachusetts. He tried to fight those extra charges and claimed double jeopardy since they came from the same scheme as his federal conviction. That appeal went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, which ruled against him. The court said federal plea bargains didn't affect state charges and that mail fraud and larceny were different offenses even if they came from the same criminal scheme. Charles acted as his own lawyer in 3 of the trials that followed. He beat the charges in 2 but lost the 3rd. After getting 7 to 9 more years, he skipped bail in 1925 and ran to Florida. There he started the Charpon Land Syndicate, the name being a mix of Charles and Ponzi. His new scam sold what he called prime Florida property for $10 per lot. The truth was those lots were just swampland he had purchased for $16 per acre. Once a con man, always a con man, I guess. The authorities caught up to his Florida scam and he tried to escape on an Italian-bound ship by shaving his head and growing a mustache. That plan failed when he told another crew member who he really was. I mean, that might be rule number 1 when it comes to hiding. Don't announce your identity. He was quickly caught and in 1934 was deported to Italy. Before he left the U.S., he told a reporter, quote, "I went looking for trouble and I found it." Back in Italy, Charles jumped from one failed scheme to another until he ended up in Brazil working for Alitalia, Italy's state airline. There are multiple stories as to how that happened. One is that he went on the run after more failed scams. Another was that his cousin was in the military and got him the job in Brazil. Yet another claims he managed to get on the good side of Mussolini's regime and they made him the airline's business manager. Either way, during World War II, the airline's operations were shut down when Brazil sided with the Allies. It was around that time that Charles wrote his autobiography, which he titled The Rise of Mr. Ponzi, the autobiography of a financial genius. I had quite a bit of trouble reading the book, as every time I saw the title, I would be too busy laughing my fucking balls off. It's in the public domain, so you can read it online for free if you really want to. After he lost his job at the airline, he stayed in Brazil living in poverty and working as a translator. His health took a bad turn after a heart attack hit him in 1941. He started losing his eyesight, and by 1948 he could barely see. A brain hemorrhage left his left side paralyzed. He died on January 18, 1949. He showed no guilt in his last interview, saying, quote, "Even if they never got anything for it, it was cheap at that price. Without malice aforethought, I had given them the best show that was ever staged in their territory since the landing of the Pilgrims. It was easily worth $15 million to watch me put the thing over." Charles Ponzi's financial scam left such a mark that his name became a permanent part of financial terminology. His scheme now serves as a measure for similar frauds that have surfaced in the years that follow. Ponzi scheme became the go-to term for investment frauds where money from new investors pays off existing investors instead of actual profits. Financial regulators worldwide now label similar frauds that way. The SEC, which started in 1934 in part due to scandals like that, has a clear definition for those schemes. They simply can't generate real returns. Financial textbooks use Charles Ponzi's story as their main example to teach fraud detection. His name has grown beyond just history to become a universal warning sign. Few scammers have left such a lasting mark on financial language as Charles Ponzi. Even Bernie Madoff, the person who conducted one of the largest Ponzi schemes in history, doesn't get his name on the scam, which I think works better. A Madoff scheme? You know, because he made off with everyone's money? Anyway, Ponzi-style scams continue popping up in new forms throughout financial history. Obviously, Bernie Madoff used Ponzi's basic tricks but worked on a much bigger scale. The crypto market has become a breeding ground for those schemes lately. BitConnect, worth $2.6 billion at its peak, fell apart in 2008 when regulators spotted its Ponzi structure. OneCoin claimed to compete with Bitcoin but turned out to be just another Ponzi scheme that stole $4 billion. Before investing money in anything, check for the basic tricks that make up a Ponzi scheme. The impossible returns, early payouts to gain trust, and math that doesn't add up. Those elements show up again and again in financial frauds, proving his shady methods work across different eras. Pyramid schemes are similar to Ponzi schemes and have persisted in society for decades. Unlike a Ponzi scheme, a pyramid scheme openly admits to relying on the money from new investors to pay current investors, but they still promise a high rate of return based on an unrealistic method of bringing in profits. They generally see the people at the top receiving the majority of the income, with the investors out their investment capital when the scheme inevitably crumbles. At the end of the day, just remember, if it seems too good to be true, it is. There is no easy money that comes with zero risk. Despite Charles Ponzi's scheme having collapsed more than 100 years ago, the core mechanics of his fraud keep showing up with shocking frequency. His simple formula, using new investor money to pay earlier investors while promising impossible returns, remains the template for countless financial scams worldwide. The same psychological weaknesses Ponzi took advantage of still exist today. People fall for suspicious investments because of greed, fear of missing out, peer pressure, and poor financial knowledge. The SEC and other financial watchdogs look carefully for warning signs Ponzi first showed us, yet his methods keep evolving with modern technology and markets. The biggest lesson from Charles Ponzi's fraud still rings true. When an investment promises amazing returns with no risk, look very carefully. That simple rule remains our best defense against financial predators who still find victims by promising what legitimate investments can't deliver. Thanks so much for letting me tell you this story. If you're a fan of true crime, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss an episode. You can also hit like or leave a comment. If you'd like to support the show, check out our merchandise at thisismonsters.com. The link is in the description. Thanks again, and be safe.